So back in 2004, in the spring of 2004, I found out that we were expecting our second child. I actually had my first child when I was away at college. I had him 2 weeks before the end of first semester finals. Had him, finished up my schoolwork, and then came back home for a winter break and went back down there and finished up with him. So I was pretty used to having a little bit of craziness in my day-to-day life with just that background story. But when I came up to start at the Medical College of Wisconsin, my son was a year and a half. My husband was away at college out of state. And so I started med school with a 1.5-year-old here in Milwaukee. So like I said, I was pretty used to having a little bit of crazy all the time. But I have a great family support system here. When my husband came up to join me here in town, we were really doing well professionally and in our personal lives. But in 2004, shortly after we learned of our pregnancy, we were in the midst of one of the craziest times, I would say, of our lives professionally. So I was just starting the second half of my second year of medical school, getting ready to prepare to take my first board exam. But we were still doing really well. My family, like I said, has been a great support to me. And we were used to having Friday night date nights. Like my parents would watch our kids every Friday night once they would sleep overnight. So we were pretty spoiled in that way. But it was on one of our Friday night date nights where our lives kind of turned in a different direction, one that we had not expected. We had gotten home from our date night, and I noticed before going to bed that I had a little bit of a pinkish discharge. And I really didn't think that much of it, but I noticed it. And so I called my doctor, and the on-call physician said, well, it doesn't sound like it's that concerning. You can come in if you want to be evaluated, but you could also just kind of monitor at home. And so I decided to just kind of monitor at home. But then when I went to the bathroom again, I noticed it again. And so I decided to come in. And on the way to the hospital, I had this feeling that like something was really wrong. And when we got to the hospital, I thought, we had just started our third year clinical rotation. So I thought some of my colleagues might have been rotating at the hospital that night, and maybe I would see one of them. These are just some of the thoughts that I had on our way in. And when I got there, the physician who examined me, like I knew right away that there was something very wrong. And I noted that, when they did the exam, they mentioned that they saw the bag of water in my vaginal canal, which meant that I was dilated. I knew that I was 22 weeks along, and I knew what that would mean, being 22 weeks along with an already dilated cervix with a bulging bag in my vaginal canal. I was immediately saddened and just very devastated. My husband, on the other hand, who was not medical at all, sometimes he thinks he's a doctor because he's married to one, but he's not. But when he saw the difficulty that I was having, he became very concerned. And it took a while for things to register for him as to what would happen. I knew that at 22 weeks, there was nothing at all wrong with my baby. I felt my baby moving, the heartbeat was strong, but I knew that I wouldn't be able to continue to support him in the way that I would need to bring him to viability. And so all night, the doctors were kind enough to turn down the fetal heart tone Doppler, so I didn't have to hear that all night. But it didn't matter. I knew that the inevitable would come. I felt him moving all night. I knew that, if I were to deliver him, that he would not be able to survive. And the following morning, I progressed. My cervix dilated more, and I delivered my second child, Josiah Garrison, at 22 weeks gestation. I didn't know how I would deal with that situation. I didn't know if I would be able to watch him as he struggled to breathe. I knew that he would have really thin skin and wouldn't be able to maintain a body temperature. I knew that his lungs were not developed. I knew that he wasn't mature and that there would be no chance of survival for him. But Josiah lived for 4 hours. And I was so grateful to have the support that I had at that time. I was grateful for the opportunity to hold him and to spend that time with him. But there were a lot of things that I experienced after I left the hospital. Like, my body didn't know that, I didn't have a baby at home with me. And so I started lactating. Within a couple of days, I was still, bleeding from, the vaginal delivery. There was just a lot that I was going through physically, but then also emotionally. And I also was being affected professionally. I had always known that I wanted to deliver babies as a part of my future practice. And I didn't know how this life experience would impact my life professionally. But I do know that Josiah definitely had a purpose. I live out that purpose every day in the care that I provide to the patients that I see, in the work that I do within the community and community engagement, with the work that I try to do with regards to population health around maternal child health and health disparities. And so I definitely live out his purpose every day. It's hard to share this story sometimes, but I definitely know that part of Josiah's purpose is me being able to share this story. I share this story with my patients who sometimes will have similar outcomes, or who are struggling with pregnancy loss, or with my colleagues, with friends and with family. And so, like I said, I know that Josiah had a purpose.
Thank you, honey, for sharing your side of the story. And, one of the things I wanted to say from my side of the story was, it was very difficult at that time in our lives where we had to experience such a loss that no family should ever have to go through. No mom should have to ever experience, and no husband or father should have to go through as well. One of the things that I had to deal with was, I knew something was wrong, but going to the hospital, I had a positive mindset. I was still thinking that we're just going to go in, check on and see what was going wrong, and, hopefully just come on back home. But getting there, and of course, knowing what I know about, complicated pregnancies, things just took a drastic turn. And it goes without saying that we of course lost my beautiful son, Josiah. Those moments where you get to hold your son or hold our child in our hand were very precious to us, and very hard for us as well. I can just remember thinking, like, I can't believe I'm in this situation. I can't believe this is happening. And then I started really thinking, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I kind of felt helpless. I felt hopeless as well. But then, of course, we leaned back on our faith, and that kind of got us going. That kind of got us through certain parts of this conversation. But, we were there until his last breath. And, we, of course, had to, say our last words. I remember going outside and just kind of looking up to the sky, and just was at a disbelief that I just had a son whom I love so much, but I could only be here with him for such a short period of time. And my wife and I, we got through it. I remember looking up in the sky and thinking to myself, he's in a better place. Hint, his middle name, Josiah Sky Garrison. And although he will never be replaced, he can never be replaced, I know that through science and through, of course, other conversations that we had about pregnancies after the fact, we were able to have successful births afterward. We were able to have my beautiful son, Solomon Garrison, right behind Josiah. We were able to have Elise Garrison, my beautiful daughter, right behind Josiah. And it just brought some happiness to the conversation after the fact. We knew that, of course, we had, it was tough going through the pregnancy, because you had you had other things in your mind that maybe this wouldn't work again. And of course, we had to talk about progesterone shots, and I was the doctor at home during that time. I just want to make sure everyone knows that. I remember
he did have to give me my injections.
Yes, I did. Every week, faithfully. I would like to say I did use all CDC. I use all proper medical
sterile techniques.
Sterile techniques, thank you. And we were able to I was able to administer those shots throughout their whole entire pregnancy. But just to let you know, my son passed away, Josiah, on August the 14th. And 1 year later, on August the 13th, we had my middle son, Solomon Garrison. Now, of course, God doesn't make any mistakes in my humble mind. But it was real hard just to know that we had to go through that. But again, we did have 2 successful pregnancies afterwards. And I think it's because of the work of the March of Dimes that helped us through that time. You know, we talked about this before. I didn't even know that the March of Dimes had sent us something at the time. They had gave us information. They were there for us in our most needed opportunity. And so again, thank you, March of Dimes, for being there for us. And now we're paying it forward. I believe that what the March of Dimes is doing for the world is needed. And so we do need you to give. We do need you to give as much as you possibly can in this campaign to make sure that no family should again have to go through this. Not one family should have to go through this. And if the March of Dimes can be a part of that, and so as well as us, we should do whatever we can to make sure that happens.
Yeah, there are a number of ways that you can support the March of Dimes. You know, one of the ways that I was able to support a few years ago was as a board member for the March of Dimes. And that was very important to me. It really gave a lot of purpose to Josiah's life. And so I was really happy to serve in that capacity. I was on the Maternal Child Health Committee and also on the Advocacy Committee for a while. But I knew that the funds that came through the March of Dimes, I knew that the work that people were doing as a part of the March of Dimes, all were going to a great cause, because no mother, no father, no family should have to suffer the loss or even the stress and complications of prematurity. And so that's why we're here. Josiah's life definitely has a purpose in the work that we do professionally for both of us, but then also personally. And so being a part of the March of Dimes has really allowed us to live out Josiah's purpose. And so we just ask that, you know, that you do whatever you can to help support us in this cause. The March of Dimes has a lot of research efforts. They do provide a lot of education to mothers and families, to physicians. We get a lot of resources from the March of Dimes, and your help in funding these things are really a great need. Some of the other things that educational efforts that the March of Dimes serves also helps with hospital institutions and programming, community engagement. And so anything that you can give, is not too little or too large of an amount, will really be helpful in supporting the March of Dimes efforts. So we thank you for taking this time to listen to our very personal story. We also thank you so much for even considering helping out in whatever capacity you can to support the great cause that the March of Dimes has, which is supporting all babies and making sure that all babies are able to come home. And we look forward to the day when all babies will be able to come home and to be healthy, and that we don't have to worry any longer about prematurity or the health disparities around prematurity and the sequelae that comes with prematurity.